Any business activity will not be complete until and unless the product is used by the consumer. If there is no society or if there are no customers, then the business cannot survive. Any businessmen who are engaged in profiteering, black marketing, hoarding, they will be punishable under this Essential Commodities Act of 1955. Whenever the business makes use of the resources of the society, it has to give back something to the society. Hello everyone, I am Purnima, faculty in the Department of Commerce, Vidhyaashram Pre-University College, Temple of Excellence. In this session on business studies, this will be the last chapter of business studies for the second PUC. That is, it is a chapter on consumer protection. Now, in this chapter, let us see what are the various things which we will be discussing here. Now, in this first topic will be introduction. Now, in this introduction, we will be just thinking about what do we mean by consumer and what do we mean by consumer protection. So, why it is necessary to have consumer protection. Then, next will be the importance of consumer protection. Why the consumer needs to be protected. And then, what are the various acts under which he gets protection. So, the third important topic is the Consumer Protection Act of 2019. And then next we will be discussing about the consumer rights. So, what are the various rights the consumer has? And next, what are the various consumer responsibilities? And lastly, we will be also discussing about the redressal agencies under the Consumer Protection Act. So, these are the various contents of this chapter. Now, in this introduction, let us see what we mean by the word consumer. A consumer is said to be a king in the market economy. The earlier approach of caveat emptor, which means let the buyer beware, has now been changed to caveat venditor. So, here we should understand that the consumer is the king. So, they say that consumer is the king. But then, before we just tell the consumer is the king, we should understand what is the meaning of the word consumer. So, a consumer is a person who consumes other products. So, a consumer is any person who purchases the products which are offered for sale by the business organization. So, he will be the ultimate factor of the business. So, any business activity will not be complete until and unless the product is used by the consumer. So, all products, whether it is manufactured, they will all be stored in the godown, and once it reaches the hands of the consumer, only then we can say that the business activity is complete. So, the entire cycle, so whatever the business community has invested in that particular area, that is, it may be the agricultural area or the manufacturing sector. So, whatever the money has been invested by the business community, that will be received or it will be returned only when there are sales. That is, only when the consumer buys the product. So, as such, we can say that the consumer is the person who decides the failure or the success of any product. So, it is necessary for the business community to take care and see that products which are manufactured are based on the customer's needs and preferences, and he gives maximum attention to consumer satisfaction or customer satisfaction, because a satisfied customer is one very good brand ambassador for the business. So, through his word of publicity, he will be just publicizing the product, as a result of which the sales of the business will improve. So, a consumer can be called as the king. Why? Because in the previous, before this Consumer Protection Act and everything, there was a saying that caveat emptor. So, what is this saying, caveat emptor? It means that let the buyer beware. So, in this, what do we mean by let the buyer beware? So, let the buyer beware means the buyer has to be very cautious about what he is buying. So, once he buys the product, he cannot just refuse that product. So, there was this saying of caveat emptor. That means the buyer should be aware of whatever he is buying and whatever the price he is paying and whatever sure about the quality of the good. But then now things have changed. Now it has become a marketing. So we say that consumer is the king. Why do we say that consumer is the king? Because he is in a position to command. So what can he command? So he can command, or he can buy only those goods which he needs or which he feels satisfied, and he can reject all other goods which he does not have any use for. So now the saying has changed. The saying has changed to caveat venditor. That means the seller beware. The seller has to be aware of whatever he is selling. So whatever he sells, if it is of no use to the customer, then he will outrightly reject such products, and hence the caveat emptor has changed to caveat venditor. So this concept of consumer is of utmost importance in this present times. Now, let us see what do we mean by the importance of consumer protection. The consumer protection has a wide agenda. It not only includes educating consumers about their rights and responsibilities, but also helps in getting their grievances redressed. Now, consumer protection has a wide agenda. So what is the agenda here? So it not only educates consumers about their rights and responsibilities. Now, the consumer protection forums which have been established, they have the duty of educating the consumers about their rights and responsibilities. What are the various rights the consumer has, and what are the various responsibilities of the consumer whenever he makes a purchase. So all these have to be educated, and the consumer has to be informed about this. Only then he can be aware of his rights and responsibilities, and then it also helps in getting their grievances redressed. Now, what do we mean by grievances redressed? Suppose if any of the consumer has been cheated of his money by the vendor or the service provider, then he should know whom he should approach and where he will get a redressal of his grievances. So this is an important right of the consumer, and it is the duty of each of citizen of India to know what is the consumer protection and what are the various rights confirmed on the consumers by the government of India. Here, let us discuss about the importance of consumer protection from the consumer's point of view. Now, here, first one is consumer ignorance. First thing is the consumers have to be protected because they are ignorant about their rights and responsibilities. So they just go and purchase and come, and if they feel cheated, they just tell their friends and relatives, and that's enough. That's over. But then if you educate the consumers about their rights, about their responsibilities, and what are the various provisions under the law which protect him, then he will be an enlightened consumer. And if there is any cheating or fraud against him by any of the business firms, then he is always protected under law. He can always go and seek justice in the court of law. Then second one is unorganized consumers. Now, in this unorganized sector, so now the consumers don't have any associations, and because of which his voice could not be heard. Now, because of this consumer protection, there are a lot of consumer organizations which have come forward, and they are standing for the rights of the consumers. They are giving a platform where the consumers can be heard, so his interests are protected. So this is an important development after the Consumer Protection Act of 1986. Then the third point from the consumer's point of view is widespread exploitation of consumers. Now, what do we mean by widespread exploitation of consumers? The consumer may be exploited by the business community, like he may be sold adulterated food, or the business community may be engaged in malpractices like hoarding, and they will also be resorting to profiteering, etc. So all these things will have an effect on the consumer. To prevent such unfair trade practices and malpractices of the business community, there is a need for protection of the consumer. Then Next, from the point of view of business, so why should the consumer be protected? Now, the first one is the long-term interest of business. Now, what do we mean by long-term interest of the business? So, if the business has to remain in the society for a very long time, then it has to take care that consumer is properly satisfied. So, if the customer is a satisfied customer, then he will give word of mouth publicity to his friends and relatives, as a result of which the sales will increase. So, it is necessary for the business community to see that they can get profit maximization through customer satisfaction. So, whenever there is a satisfied customer, we can ensure that he will come back for a repeat purchase. Now, the next one is business uses society's resources. So, as we all know, whenever we have to start a business, we require the 4 M's of business. Now, what are the 4 M's of business? That is men, money, materials and machines. So, they are the 4 M's of business. Now, these 4 M's of business, they will be provided by the society itself. The business cannot just run in isolation. It needs the various resources like the human resource, the raw materials, and also there are various other resources through which the business has to survive, and all this is being provided by the society. And moreover, the society will be encouraging the sales of that particular organization. If there is no society or if there are no customers, then the business cannot survive. So, whatever the money invested by the business community along with the resources provided by the society, only then the business can run. So, it is necessary for every business to see that the society's interest is taken care of. So, as it is making use of the resources of the society, it has to ensure that whatever products it is giving back to the society, it should be of a very good quality, of a very high standard, and it should be of use to the consumers. Then, third one is social responsibility. Now, we call it as the corporate social responsibility. So, whenever the business makes use of the resources of the society, it has to give back something to the society. So, it will be making lots of crores of money in terms of profits, but then when the society at large is under any threat, or if there is any natural calamities like earthquake or something like that, then it is the duty of the business community to look after the welfare of the society. So, that is what we call as the social responsibility. Then, the business community has to take care that whatever production or whatever manufacturing it is doing, it should not be at the cost of environment. So, environmental pollution should be avoided as far as possible, and then over and above that, the business has to see that there are a lot of employment opportunities which are created for the youth of the society. So, only then it can prosper. So, if it offers more employment to the youth, only then they get more purchasing power, and when there is more purchasing power, it also increases the demand for the products. So, this is a cycle which has to be taken care of by the business community. Then, next one is moral justification. Now, in this moral justification, we see that it is the duty of every business organization to see that it provides clean and good goods to the society. So, it should take care of the health of the consumers. It should take care to see that the consumers are fully satisfied. Then, the last one is government intervention. What do we mean by government intervention? So, if any of the business community is resorting to any unfair and exploitative trade practices, then it will invite the governmental intervention. So, if the products are found to be unsafe for the consumer's health, then the government has to intervene and stop the production of such products. And as such, it is the duty of the business community to see that the products which it is giving to the customers are safe and they are taken well care of. And it is also ensuring that the customers are fully satisfied about their product. So we should see that there is no governmental intervention regarding the business activities of that area. So from the business point of view, we have so many points for consumer protection. Now let us look into the legal protection given to consumers. The Indian legal framework consists of various laws under which the consumers have been protected. According to the Right to Information Act of 2002, all the citizens of India have to be aware of the various provisions under which they can be protected under the law. Now, the first act which was passed for the consumer protection was the Consumer Protection Act of 1986. Now, under this act, it gives safeguard to the consumers against the malpractices and the unfair trade practices of the business community. If any of the consumer has been duped or cheated of his money, then he can always approach the court of law under this Consumer Protection Act of 1986. Now, what does this act tell? Under this act, it has directed the state government to set up a district forum and also a state commission to look after the consumer's grievances. Now, if the consumer has been duped of his money or if he has been cheated, then he can always approach these district forums or the state commission and get relief for his grievances. Then, it has also directed the central government to set up a national commission wherein the consumers' grievances will be heard all over the country. Then the next act is the Indian Contract Act of 1872. Now, under this Indian Contract Act of 1872, it binds both the contractor and the contractee in the contract. That is, whenever they come together and sign a contract, both of them have to stand by or stick to the terms and conditions they have promised to each other. Then, the next important legal protection given to consumers is the Sale of Goods Act of 1930. Now, what do we mean by Sale of Goods Act of 1930? The Sale of Goods Act, it provides the consumer against the goods which do not match with the promised warranties and conditions. So, if the goods are not as per the standards, then the consumer can always approach the court of law. Then, next one is the Essential Commodities Act of 1955. Now, what does this act tell us? This act regulates the production, supply and distribution of essential commodities. So, whatever the essential commodities which are grown in India or in the continent, in this subcontinent, it has to be distributed equally among the consumers, and any profiteers, any businessmen who are engaged in profiteering, black marketing, hoarding, they will be punishable under this Essential Commodities Act of 1955. Then the next important act is the Agricultural Produce Grading and Marking Act of 1937. So as per the regulations of this act, the agricultural produce, whatever is grown, it has to be graded and sorted as per the sections of this act, and whatever the grading will be done and whatever the agricultural produce it has come, it will be subject to this AG mark. So, AG mark is the acronym for Agricultural Produce Marketing, and this AG mark products are of a very high standard. So, those agricultural products which meet the standard set in this act, so they will be stamped with the AG mark seal and they are considered of a very high quality. So, these are the various acts under which the Indian consumer has been protected. Now, the next important act is the Prevention of Food Adulteration Act of 1954. Now, what does this act tell us? Under this act, it provides protection for the food products. So, whatever the food products which are offered for the consumers, they have to be in the purest form. If there is any adulteration of any of the food products, then such a businessman can be booked under the Prevention of Food Adulteration Act of 1954. Now, why this act has been enacted? So, this is basically to protect the health of the consumers, to ensure that whatever food products are provided to the consumers, they are in the purest form and there is no adulteration of any sort in this act. Then the next one is the Standards of Weights and Measures Act of 1976. Now, what does the Standards and Weights Measures Act of 1976? What does it tell us? Now, if any of the products have to be sold, then through weights and measures, then that such and weights and measures have to be certified under this provisions of this act. So whatever the weights they are using, it may be the 1 kg or half a kg or quarter kg. So whatever the weights and measures, they have to be sealed under this act. Only then it can be used by the business community. Now, why should we ensure that? We should ensure that all the seals are intact for the weights, because there is no cheating on for the consumer. The business community may resort to cheating the consumer, and as a result of which the Indian government was compelled to make this act, that is the Standards, Weights and Measures Act of 1976. Then the next one is the Trademarks Act of 1999. Now, what do we mean by trademark? So we all know it is the registered brand of any product. So if a brand is registered, then we can call it as a trademark, and this trademark has to be legally protected. So if one business community has registered its brand under the registrar, then that trademark cannot be used by any other community. Now, this legal protection is given to the trademark so that everybody cannot make use of that trademark, and only that business who has registered, only he can make use of that trademark. Then next one is the Competition Act of 2002. Now, this Competition Act of 2002, it replaced the Monopolistic and Restrictive Trade Practices Act of 1969. So, this was enforced to ensure that there is proper competition in the market, and those practices which hamper the competition, they can be booked under the provisions of this Act. Now, the last act is the Bureau of Indian Standards Act of 1986, or we also call it as the ISI. Now, what does this ISI mark stand for? Now, under this act, the Bureau of Indian Standards, it has set up the standards for all the products, and also it ensures certification of all the products under this ISI mark. Now, why should we have a standards? Because whenever a business produces goods, it will be for his profits only. He will not see that whether the consumers are protected. So, it is necessary to bring a regulation to see that the products are completely safe for the consumers, and as such, under this act, it has provided for the safety of the consumers. So whatever the consumer durables which are produced by the business community, they have to meet the standards set up by the Bureau of Indian Standards, and if the products are meeting the standards, only then they can get a certification under this act. So they can get an ISI mark on their products, which ensures that the consumers are legally protected. And in spite of having an ISI mark, if there is any defect in the product, the consumer can go to the court of law and get relief under the various provisions of the law. Now, next, the Consumer Protection Act of 1986. Now, let us see what this Consumer Protection Act of 1986 tells us. The Consumer Protection Act seeks to protect and promote the consumer's interest through speedy and inexpensive redressal of their grievances. Now, under the Consumers Protection Act, the consumer's interest is properly protected. How it is protected? Speedy, that is, he should get a relief very fast. Court case should not go for a very long time. So, within a span of at least 1 year, he should get relief for his grievances. And inexpensive. So, whatever he has spent for the legal advice regarding his grievances, that has to be compensated for, and also an inexpensive redressal of their grievances. So their grievances has to be heard very fast and the relief should be given very fast. So this is the main provision of the Consumer Protection Act of 1986. Now let us look into what are the various consumer rights which have been conferred on the consumer by the Consumers Protection Act of 1986. Now the first one is the right to safety. Now what is the meaning of this right to safety? Now, the consumer has to be protected against certain hazardous goods which are offered by the business community. So, suppose if these goods are causing any injury to the consumer, then he should have the right to ensure his safety, as a result of which he has been confirmed this right to safety. Now, this right to safety ensures that the consumer is properly protected against hazardous products or hazardous elements which go into the making of the product. Then second right is the right to be informed. Now what do we mean by right to be informed? In this, the consumer has every right to know what goes into the product. So what are the ingredients of the product? What is the weight of the product? What is the date of manufacturing? What is the date of expiry, etc. So all these things have to be made known to the consumer. So this right ensures that there is a proper label for all the products which are produced. So it ensures that the manufacturer has a responsibility in case the products are not up to the standards. Then the next one is the right to choose. So this is a right confirmed to the consumer, as a result of which he should be given a choice of goods. Any of the sellers or the vendors, they cannot just coerce the consumer to buy the product without offering him any choice. So the consumer should have a proper choice of goods from which he can make a choice. So this is the right to choose. Then the fourth right is right to be heard. Now, under this fourth right, that is the right to be heard, the consumer has every right to just go and file a complaint if he is dissatisfied about any of the products or service. So, because of this right, most of the business organizations have set up their own consumer grievance cell where the consumers can come and just tell their grievances and get proper relief from that particular business organization. Then next one is right to seek redressal. Now under this right to seek redressal, the consumer can go to the court of law and seek relief for any of the products. Like if there has been any defect in the product, so the defect can be removed, or if the product is not of a very good quality, then he can get a replacement for the product, and he can also get compensation for any of the injuries suffered because of the product. Then the last one is right to consumer education. So under this right, it is the consumer's right to know more information about the various provisions of the law. So he should have proper knowledge about the various products which are available in the market, and also the various provisions under which he has been protected. So all these rights ensure that the consumer is properly protected, and any violation of these rights, they can seek redressal from the various business organizations, and he has a voice which can be properly heard. Let us see what are the various responsibilities of the consumer. Now, first one is the consumer be aware about various goods and services available in the market so that an intelligent and wise choice can be made. Now, whenever the consumer goes to buy a product, he should have proper knowledge of what are the various choices he has. Now, if he goes to buy a shoes or anything, then what are the various brands of shoes available? What are the various styles of shoes available? So all this he should know. Only then he can make an intelligent and wise decision. Then next one is buy only standardized goods as they provide quality assurance. So it is the responsibility of the consumer to see that he goes in for standardized goods, that is those which meet the ISI mark or the FPO mark. So in this way, there are certain standards which are set up by the Indian government, and these standards are met, and only those goods should be purchased by the consumer. Then learn about the risks associated with the products and services, follow manufacturer's instructions, and use the products safely. So it is the duty of the consumer to learn about the products, risks, and services. The manufacturer would have given a warning about the use of products. Then the consumer has to take the necessary precautions, and then he has to make use of the product. Only then the product can be safely used. But in case he does not take any caution, and if he does not take any precautions, and if he has any injury, then he cannot seek redressal for his grievance. Then the next consumer responsibilities is read labels carefully so as to have information about prices, net weight, manufacturing and expiry dates, etc. So we all know that products come in labels. So the labels will contain all information about the ingredients of the product. So he has to have proper information about the what is the net weight of the product, what is the price of the product, what is the manufacturing date, what is the expiry date. Now, why is it necessary to mention expiry date? Because once the date of expiry is over, the product starts deteriorating and it is unsafe for use. So it is the duty of the consumer to ensure that the products are well within the expiry date of manufacture. Then assert yourself to ensure that you get a fair deal. Now, what is this assert yourself to ensure? So the consumer should know what he is buying and whether he is getting a fair deal for his money. So that it is the consumer's duty to ensure that the products he is buying are through a fair deal. Then next one is be honest in your dealings. Choose only from legal goods and services and discourage unscrupulous practices like black marketing, hoarding, etc. So it is the consumer's responsibility to see that he buys only from legal services. That is, all illegal goods and services, they should not be encouraged by the consumers, and if we encourage them, then it may give rise to black marketing and hoarding, and as a result of which the prices of the goods will start varying. So in order to discourage all these things, it is the duty of the consumer to see that he buys only from legal sources. Then next responsibility of the consumer is ask for cash memo on purchase of goods and services. This would serve as a proof of purchase made. So whenever the consumer makes a purchase for any goods, then he should insist on a cash memo. So nowadays we see the shopkeepers, they tell, if we are getting the bill, then you will have to pay extra tax on that. But then even though we pay tax as a good citizen of India, we should ensure that we get a cash memo for every bill, because it will also ensure that the particular vendor or the seller, he will be paying tax for all the sales he has made. Then in addition to that, this bill will be a proof of purchase for the consumer. Then next one is form consumer societies which would play an active part in educating consumers and safeguarding their interests. Now, it is the responsibility of the consumer to form societies and forums so that they have an organized association to protect their own selves from this unscrupulous businessmen. So they should form themselves into societies and forums to see that they educate the consumers about the rights and duties, and also they will safeguard their interests. Then last one is respect the environment, avoid waste, littering and contributing to pollution. So this is the most important responsibility of every citizen of India. So whenever we buy a packet of chips, the chips will be immediately consumed, but then that plastic bag or the wrapper, that will be around in the environment for a very long time because it does not degrade. A wrapper which is made use of for the chips, that will be there in the environment, it will be polluting the environment. So we should ensure that we have a clean environment. By how do we have a clean environment? To see that we avoid waste, littering and contributing to pollution. Hope you have all understood this session on consumer protection. Thank you.